Morning all, and welcome to Beyond the White Line Live, Changemakers series episode 1. So bit of a new world for us. We're trying something new this morning, streaming out across multiple platforms. Hopefully the audience is small enough that we've got room for a few errors, but really excited to be here. Got some amazing speakers this morning, talking across a range of subjects, and I'm going to avoid a long-winded intro and get straight into it, and let the speakers really do the talking this morning. Just to manage expectations, we're looking to run for about an hour. That'll include sort of a Q&A towards the end of the session. Please feel free to dive into the chat. I mean, also you can tweet us and reach out to us on Twitter at Beyond the White Line or Beyond TWL. I think it'll all be on your screen. Instagram also. You can follow this stream live on Twitch as well. But as I say, if you've got any questions at all, just dive into the chat, pop them in, and we'll come to them either during the session or at the end. Let us know you're watching, if you're watching, and where you're watching from. So yeah, without further ado, we've got some exciting announcements later as well, but I'm going to dive straight in and introduce our first speaker, Daniel Smith from Summer Sports, partner and director. Morning, Dan. How are you?
Morning, James. Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate.
Yeah. Also on my screen, you're also known as James Shiffey, founder of Beyond the White Line. There you go. So yeah, Dan, we'll come to you in a second, but thank you so much for joining us this morning and sparing the time. Really appreciate it. We've also got Alex Popham, former Welsh international rugby player and founder of Head for Change. Morning, Al.
Morning, all.
How's the body after your bike ride, your epic ride?
Yeah, I've recovered now.
You've recovered.
And,
excellent.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. Great to have you on this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Also like to welcome Jamie Hooper, who's the founder of Inclusive Cultures and co-founder of the Include Summit, which is coming up next month, which is amazing. Good morning, Jamie. How are you?
Hey, mate. Yeah, I'm impressed you got that right. I keep mixing them up as I introduce them. Yeah, really good to be here.
I'm doing my bit. I'm trying. I mean, I kind of feel like I owe you that just to get the intro right, at least. It's the least I can do. And last but certainly not least, someone I know very well who's been an advisor and a part of the Beyond the White Line journey since conception, really. Again, former international footballer, Welsh footballer, Simon Church. Good morning, Simon. Founder of CBD Performance. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Kind of rolling with this whole new thing, so we'll see how we go. Thanks so much for joining us. So yeah, really good to have all the speakers here. I'd like to welcome them all now to the panel to obviously dive in. We've got a range of topics to go across this morning. So just to provide a little bit more context on each individual, I'm going to sort of hand over to them to give you a brief overview of who they are and their organization and what they do. So in a similar order, Dan, if we come to you first, if you could just let everyone know who's tuning in this morning a little bit more about yourself and Summers and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, James. I suppose thanks for having me first and foremost. Summers Sports Group, as James said, founded it 3 years ago, and I'm now a partner and director of the company. Essentially an athlete management firm, sports marketing organization that focuses on athlete management. And prior to founding Summers, I was working at Nike for 8 years in the sponsorship team, and basically saw an opportunity to take a more holistic approach to athlete management. So that's really what we do at Summers. So we have 12 clients who are all we like to think quite high profile and achieving great things in their sport, and we provide kind of a 360-degree service to them, focusing on their performance on the track for the likes of KJT, Jay Jones, Kadina Cox, but also working with them on what they want to be outside of sport and what they want to stand for. So their passions, their commercial management, and then their sport themselves. So that's kind of what we do in our bread and butter, really.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Alex, again, if we could come to you really for the same, just a little bit of background, some context, and obviously what you're doing now.
Morning, all. Thank you, James. Everybody else has had a practice of what they're saying. I got on the call a bit late, so apologies. But Alex Popham, former Welsh international. I was professional for 14 seasons. And after finishing playing, most probably about 2 years ago now, I started struggling with different symptoms and got diagnosed with probable CTE and early onset dementia from head knocks whilst playing rugby. And we soon realised there wasn't any charity or support out there dedicated to 35, 40-year-olds having this diagnosis. So we set up a foundation called Head for Change, and there's 3 key areas of the foundation. That's support for the family members and the ex-athlete, education, and that is from grassroots all the way up to elite level, and then research and it's independent research away from the governing bodies, which is a big talking point at the moment. So Head for Change is a young charity, but we've made a big impact in the 12, 13 months we've been live. So yeah,
amazing.
A good start.
I'm really looking forward to diving into this morning with you. Thank you so much. Jamie, so again, like plenty to talk about, which we're going to dive into some more detail, but if you could just give everyone a bit of background as well and some context, please.
Yeah, so I've spent kind of 10 years or so working in traditional sports sector in equality, diversity, inclusion roles, mostly in kind of participation, a little bit of internal stuff. I left the traditional sports sector and launched my own consultancy last year, Inclusive Cultures, which is all about supporting people in a sector who are ready to make a difference around equality, diversity, inclusion, both kind of internally and across participation, or kind of across getting everyone else engaged. I also had the opportunity then to team up with a business partner and develop the Include Summit. So that's taking place on 8th, 9th of March of this year. And is set to be the biggest equality, diversity, inclusion conference for the sports sector. We'll talk about that a lot more, but it's a whole range of emotions being less than 3 weeks away from the start of it now. But it's great to be here to talk about it.
Listen, I'm impressed that you were able to spare the time, to be honest with I mean, that lineup is unbelievable. Simon, good morning. We've known each other probably 3 or 4 years now, and over that time you've been quite close to the project and what we're doing Beyond the White Line. But just if you could just give everyone some background on yourself and obviously what you're doing with CBD Performance.
Yeah, I'm an ex-Wales international footballer. Had a 14-year career. Unfortunately, it cut short through injury. I had to retire at the age of 28. And while I was going through my career, I always struggled with pain management and injuries, and became reliant on painkillers and pharmaceutical aids to kind of get me through training and games, and stumbled across CBD. Had such a positive effect on me. At the time, it was legalised in sport. And after having such a positive effect and looking at the market, I saw a huge gap in the market for transparent premium CBD products that would help people in sports nutrition and the health and fitness world. So jumped into that alongside helping you, James, and just giving some advice, because again, coming out of sport, there's a huge issue which I'm sure we're going to dive into. Had lots of problems myself, and that's where we're at now.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, when you're doing virtual and online, it's hard to get that sort of audience participation and feedback. But I think for those tuning in, you'd agree it's an incredible panel. People with a real sort of diverse range of experiences, lived experiences, perspectives now, a view on the landscape of the global sporting landscape. And the Changemakers title is all about that, really. It's about what change we've seen in recent years, what we believe is happening now in the current climate, and maybe what the future holds and what change is required, celebrating those that are obviously affecting change, and most of whom are on this call here today and will be in future episodes, and really diving into the detail and unpacking it a little bit, and hopefully for those tuning in as well, it's an opportunity to come along that journey and learn and contribute and be a part of it. I know there's a few people who are already working in the space who are change makers in their own right that are here today watching. So, I mean, it really is about bringing that community together and discussing it and connecting, I suppose, the dots a little bit between what I find often society and fans. There's a little disconnect between that and the reality of the industry and what what's happening and what change is coming and required and so on. So hopefully we can start to bridge that gap a little bit. I'm going to dive straight in, if I may, with Dan and ask you, I mean, look, we've spoken a little bit about this, but from your perspective and from an agency perspective, looking at social media at the moment is a massive topic. I see a lot of it. We get a lot of referrals around challenges to do with social media engagement, and, you know, with athletes and how they use their platforms and the opportunities versus the risks and so on. I mean, what's your experience at the moment? You've just gone through, you know, major events with the Olympics, with Kadena and KJT and so on. What's your experience of that, you know, opportunity versus risk and personal brand and social media engagement sort of piece?
Yeah, big question.
Sorry, yeah, so I'd start with a small one, obviously.
Open, but I think it's you know, I think in sport as in life at the moment, social media has brought with it all kinds of opportunities, as you allude to, but alongside that, all kinds of challenges, right, as to how the platform is used. And when you are an athlete, whether that's a developing athlete or an athlete at the top of your game, you know, managing those opportunities and managing the challenges that social media brings is actually a real interesting discussion, because, you know, 10 years ago it was something that athletes didn't have to think about, they didn't have to worry about, and, you know, if you were a professional footballer or a professional track and field athlete, it was just go out, do your sport, you know, do your media for 20 minutes after a game or after a race, and then, you know, back to training. Whereas now, kind of with the prevalence of social media and the fact that it's everywhere, and there is an expectation from athletes that you will share how training is going, how performances have been, how you feel about a game. You know, it's a weight that can be pretty heavy, I think, on athletes when things are going well, and even heavier when things aren't going badly. So I think, you know, there is a mass amount of opportunity in it to connect with consumers, to tell your own story, to diversify your income streams, right, through commercial partnerships, through your own audience. But I think a lot of it is about education, and for those athletes that are maybe in their early 30s or late 20s, it's something that's really developed as their careers have been building. So it's not something that they grew up with, but it's something they've had to learn on the go, and really had to find their balance with it. And what I said to you yesterday, James, and what I say to all of my athletes is, you know, before we get excited about the opportunities out there and the way in which we can develop your platforms, connect with your audiences, and you know, hopefully have an impact through your channels, we need to understand what those risks are. And although you don't want to approach the conversation negatively, you do have to educate athletes on some of the challenges of social media and how best to protect themselves, make themselves safe online, and then prepare themselves for some negative comments or some difficult situations. And you know, having the athletes prepared for that as their profiles grow and as opportunities come will mean that ultimately in the long term you're in a much better place. So, you know, there's an element of, you know, standardization of things that you can provide to athletes and conversations that you can have with everyone to prepare them for the world of social media and how to build their brand. But once you get to a certain level, it's all about speaking to the athlete, having a personal conversation, and then doing what's right for them and their brand on the right channel. And it becomes, you know, the further you take it, the more bespoke that opportunity becomes, and the more bespoke your approach has to come. So, you know, it's quite a complex topic, but hopefully I've given you kind of an insight as to how we go about it.
Where do you think the responsibility fundamentally lies, though? And I know that there's no clear answer to this. I appreciate I'm sort of hanging you out to dry a little bit, because I think it's a process, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved in that process. But do you think there is somewhere in there where the responsibility ultimately lies to guide them, you know, on that balance and on, you know, weighing up that opportunity versus risk? And at what point do you think we need to get in and get amongst that conversation?
Yeah, responsibility and accountability, I think, you know, sits with everyone that uses it. So, you know, if the athlete chooses to use a platform, then they have a certain amount of accountability to make sure that they're prepared to use it. And if a federation or a brand or a fan is wanting to engage with that athlete on the platform, then I think they have an accountability as well. And I think passing the buck between people isn't the approach that we need to be taking. It's taking a group approach to how do we make online spaces safe, and that includes, you know, talking to the platforms themselves about how their spaces can be safer places for athletes and for people to operate. And I think there are different levels of service that different elements can provide. So for a team, you know, if you're England football or England rugby, you know, you can provide a level of service for your players that is going to lay great foundations for your teams for the future, from a youth age level up to senior age level. But teams can't be expected to support one-to-one content development and ideation and commercial partnerships. You know, involvement is going to stop at one level, and maybe at that point that's where the agents get more involved, and there are teams around the athletes that can support those more specific campaigns or more specific ideas, really. And then I think as fans, ultimately, hopefully there's a few of us on this call that enjoy sport. We have, I think, a responsibility to engage positively with content and stories and support athletes online. If we're going to enjoy watching them, week in, week on the pitch, then let's support them on their social platforms as well.
Simon, you must have seen it change a lot in your time. I mean, in football, the advent of social media and the interactions, like how that's changed not only the use but potentially the abuse. I mean, what have you seen change in recent years, really, from your experience? Yeah,
I mean, from the very beginning, there wasn't any social media at all, and I think it started with Twitter, where it just started. As players, you tried to use it as a platform to kind of build yourself, build your own brand. Like Dan was saying, it was important, but you didn't really think of it in that much detail. It was more an opportunity to kind of interact with fans, which quickly turned into not interacting with fans just because of there's such a low barrier to entry of people commenting on certain stuff. I mean, I had it throughout my career where I didn't want to even look at it after games, because you can have, one bad comment out of 1,000, but that one bad comment sticks with you. And I think, it's taken till now to have a real conversation about it. I can't see too much really happening with it, with the governing bodies and things like that. But us discussing it and, like Dan was saying, there's also the other side where it can be used in such a positive way and create opportunities for players, for athletes, create brand opportunities, and it's taken over. It's taken over. Everyone uses social media now, and that seems to be the port of call for most comments and brand activations as well.
This is to any of you, really. What change does anyone have a view on what change they believe is required, or what might be around the corner to be able to allow us and be empowered to use social media for good, and to develop personal brands, elevate, drive message, have impact, and so on, but whilst mitigating those risks? Does anyone feel that there's either someone out there already making great strides within this space, or any initiatives that they'd like to see?
I think you've got to look at the platforms itself, and there has to be some sort of screening process, because for all the positives that come with it, the negatives are the biggest impactful situations that happen on social media. And, with everything that's been going on in the last 18 months, misinformation, all this kind of stuff has been flagged up. But you're telling me you can't stop people from abusing people or saying the wrong things, or racism or anything like that. They'll be seeing this, and there should be a way of stopping this at source, and also verifying who the account holders are. I mean, again, that's not difficult. They have enough personal data and information when you sign up. They should be able to instantly block this and stop you from using it. That's my opinion, anyway.
Jamie, I can see you nodding along as well. I mean, any thoughts on this? I mean, it's a subject we've discussed, but
yeah, I think I saw something recently that Twitter was starting to look at introducing verification on profiles in some way. So I think there's a way of either, I don't know, you need to submit a photo at some point, or make your IP or tracking available, so like you can get found, you can be identified. I think
I can hear now.
Alex, you want to jump in?
No.
I think he's having a technical issue.
I think he's having a tech issue, yeah.
So I was just going to mention around like the policy side of things. So I worked at Sport England for 2.5 years, and we in that time introduced a hate speech policy around trying to manage more stuff online. That was interesting because it was more from a brand kind of organization perspective, but that's starting to leak out, I think, into what governing bodies are doing. But I think it's still quite new, where a a lot of organizations maybe don't even have kind of social media leads. Some of the smaller governing bodies, it's people are doing this work amongst doing other things, but it's when you start to venture in that world, you need to be prepared for all the outcomes. And this is just, as Simon was saying, the negative side of it is just so big now that you need to be prepared for it. So yeah, I think it's tricky because everybody wants to be on it and using it for good ways, but yeah, we need to be better at managing that negative side of it. I'm very conscious I've not given like an answer there, but I think it's really difficult.
I don't think there is a cut and dry answer. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people on this, experts, better, more well versed than I, and maybe any of us who work in the space. I've spoken to individuals at these platforms, and the interesting thing is they said it's really problematic. You know, they said the perception externally in society is that we don't discuss it, that we don't care, that there's no mind thought put into it. And actually, you know, the reality on the other side is they're having, you know, extended, endless meetings about it and what they can do. And they said, one of the things they said to me, and this is just sort of from their perspective, and I don't know if I have a view on this, but they said it's problematic whichever way you go. You know, if we start looking at taking IDs and having all this additional data, whether it's with passports or verifying through driving licenses and other forms of ID, then there's potential risk to individuals. So if, for example, an individual they need their freedom of speech, also they're trying to retain that. We're not media or news outlets, so we don't want to control the narrative. And these are all the arguments that they put forward, and that they said that. And then if we have an individual that's quite divisive or has put out an opinion or a view or a perspective that is coming from an opposing side to another, and all of their data, including home address and et cetera, is within the platform, there's risk then that people may be able to access them, and there could be risk to them, you know, from a harm perspective. And there's all these other areas that, you know, even I sort of pare it back. In my mind, I think it's easy. You know, it's like we're discussing. Surely it's easy. You know, you verify accounts, like Simon was saying. You track the IDs. You do whatever it takes. But I understand that there are other factors at play that maybe we're not privy to. But I think that's the issue for me, is the lack of transparency.
I've had a few conversations, I suppose, on that level with the athletes that we work with, and the teams that we work with, and the danger sometimes, you know, in politics or in sport or in all of these things, is that we all sit here and we go, yeah, okay, the Facebook and Twitter need to change their algorithms and need to change the way they operate, and, you know, then we'll be fine. But ultimately, like, it's going to take us a year, 2 years, 3 years to change that stuff. And ultimately, it's not something I have control over. It's not something that the athletes have control over. So, you know, in the meantime, what do? We just wait. And then all of a sudden, Facebook changed their method of working, or Twitter does, and TikTok comes along, and they don't have the same level of authentication or the same way of monitoring, tracking. So, you know, we could ultimately just be kicking the can down the road. And when you speak to athletes and they're saying, how do I manage this? Or how do I kind of filter out the bad and focus on the good? You know, you kind of have to give them a solution. It isn't, well, let's wait for Facebook or let's wait for Twitter. It's you have to give them a solution. And I think going back to what Simon said a little bit, and I'm sure Alex has experienced this as well, the way that we try and reframe the conversation a little bit to our team is, you know, trying to make these platforms feel like a stadium, right? When you're in a stadium and you're competing in front of 50,000 people, you know, a lot of people are going to be shouting. There's going to be a lot of good stuff. There's going to be a lot of bad stuff. You know, it's going to depend on the performance, and it's going to depend on whether people individually like you, but you don't take in every single comment that goes on around.
That's a great point.
You don't sit there and go, well, that one person in the corner said I had a bad game or did a bad kick or didn't execute properly, therefore I'm going to dwell on that. You kind of take the vibe in and the atmosphere of the space, and you try, if anything, to embrace it and perform better as a result of it. So, you know, framing up the conversation around social media and saying, you know, think of Twitter as a bit of a stadium. You know, you're going to get 100,000 people following you. 99% of those are going to be roaring you on to be successful. And yeah, they might not all comment, but they might like your post and be supporting you silently. You're going to have a few haters in there, and, you know, that's easier. That's easy to say, isn't it? Just ignore the haters. But that's kind of how you have to approach it. Is like there are always going to be people that don't like what you're doing or have negative things to say about you, and that doesn't make that right. And some of the stuff that gets said online is abhorrent and needs to be dealt with. But when it comes to giving the athlete something that they can tangibly do and ways that they can approach it, you just have to kind of educate them in a way to expect it and say, this is going to happen. And this is not about trying to stop it from happening, but it's helping you to manage it and approach it as playing football in the stadium. That's your fans, that's your supporters. Most of it's positive. There will be some negatives. Let's just try not to focus on those. And there's no one way of doing that, but each athlete will find their own way of coping with it. But it's just saying the scene correctly at the start does help. It doesn't solve it, but it does help.
And I think it proves that, it's not a one point solution, right? And I think also, as well as like being proactive and educating, it's to support, as you say, along the way, and support beyond, whilst we find that better landscape where things are improved. Just going to change tack quickly. I mean, we from obviously talking of different perspectives and so on, Jamie, the work that you've done within equity, diversity, inclusion over the last few years has been incredible. The work that you stand to do is truly in the realm of Changemaker. The Include Summit is going to be an incredible event. I really want to jump into that, but what, just from your perspective, before we get into that, can you tell us, like, what have you seen? Because this all ties back into that social media space, really. But what have you seen within, that ED&I space in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of a shift and a change? Because for me, I think I've seen the needle move massively. But what's your perspective? I mean, you're a lot closer to it than I.
Yeah, I think the last few years particularly has been really interesting. Whether I think kind of spurred on by COVID and what we've seen in terms of how that's affected kind of different communities in different ways, as well as things like Black Lives Matter, the Sarah Everard kind of event, I guess, for want of a better word. Things like major events coming back to sport. There's lots of things where we've had a lot more conversation on this stuff. And I think from moving from that kind of traditional space, working for an employer, to launching my own business as a consultant in this space in the middle of a pandemic, the fact that I was able to kind of work throughout that time, and with a lot of partners who I maybe didn't expect to have budget available or want to do work in this space or invest more in this, and have been really taken aback by people who are prepared to put money where their mouth is and get on and want to invest and do work in this space. It sounds a bit like surface level to bring it down to money, but in traditional sport, that is
but it's an indicator, right? It's we've always seen this space, like I run a not-for-profit. I mean, you work within ED&I. We're always the token gestures. We're tick boxes at best. I mean, there's barely ever any real initiatives or investment, right? So it is an indicator of change.
Yeah, and I think it's that shift from having kind of a token board member to say, I'm interested in this stuff, I'll help support the organization. We've moved on to employing full-time equality, diversity, inclusion leads within lots of different organizations. There's a debate about whether that's a positive or a negative move around whether this should be everybody's responsibility and we embed this stuff properly in the organization. But I think having somebody there full-time responsible is progress. So yeah, I think we have moved on from that space. And one of the really important things we're starting to see is that senior leaders are becoming more comfortable to publicly say that they don't have the answers, they don't know enough, and they're prepared to learn. A lot of the time we say in this space around things like privilege or institutionalized racism that the first step is about recognizing that it exists. It's not about denial. It's not about putting the shutters down. It's not about being scared to kind of talk about some of this stuff. And some of the most powerful things I think we've seen come out recently is where those leaders that are kind of more in that ally space are much more able to feel like they can talk about this stuff, which I think is a really important indicator for where we go next.
What is the biggest gap, though? I mean, right now we're celebrating the progress that's been made, but what's the biggest gap? Is it around that leadership? Is it around that strategic leadership for everything to really kick on from here?
I think the answer to that is the testament to what we're doing with the Include Summit, that there is nobody that is really taking this EDI space within the sports sector in a hands-on strategic approach. There are strategies, there are kind of like charters is the word I'm looking for. There's government policy. There's things out there that people can work towards, but there's no one organization really pulling people together on this stuff and pushing them to make a difference. We have seen the governance code for sport updated around diversity for board levels. There's a new equality standards for sport coming, but again, the onus of that all falls back on individual organizations. What we are doing with the Include Summit is for the first time bringing everyone together collectively across that EDI space in sport to create a movement ourselves to support people to connect and be able to build on that together, as opposed to waiting for the time when Sport England, as an example, say you have to do this or your funding is getting cut. Let's do it in a more holistic, collective way.
Yeah, I can echo a little bit of your experience there. See, with a lot of organizations I work with, it's they sort of have, you know, these audit checklists, and ultimately it comes down to, so the senior management will be looking at it like, are we hitting this checklist? Are we ready for audit? Or scrambling last minute to, you know, to put an initiative in or to drive something towards, you know, meeting those requirements. There's very little in way of like proactive approach often, or there's a reactive piece because there's a challenge or an incident, so they have to sort of rally and jump around a situation. You know, I too want to see, you know, more leadership in the space and a more proactive approach, and that community that you talk about is essential to make that happen. And what I mean, like, tell us about the Include Summit, because like, whilst you know, this isn't the Graham Norton show or something where we all sort of do a round robin and plug our products. This is different. This is game changer. This is exactly the sentiment of this talk today, Changemakers. I think it's going to change the space forever, and I'd love you to just tell us a bit more about it, who's speaking, the areas of interest and topics that you'll be covering.
Yeah, I mean, like it's an absolute monster. So this started as an idea with a business partner of mine, Gomez. We connected very quickly. We connected through hockey because that's our sport. He was involved in a letter that came out about England hockey being institutionally racist. He runs an event management company, and we put our heads together to say, can we put our skill sets together and look to do something in this space? That was about a year ago, and over that space, it's evolved into the Include Summit. So we're a 2-day full event, in person and hybrid, in the city centre of Birmingham, covering every kind of conversation you can imagine around equality, diversity and inclusion across the breadth of sport. We really wanted to pull all of this together in one place for the first time. And considering we've started this from absolute scratch, from nothing at all, we've just been so blown away by the level of engagement from partners, from speakers to want to be involved. And the testament to that is that what we've heard more so than anything else is that people really respect the fact that it's independent. It's not attached to politics. There's no kind of red tape behind it. This is about getting people together for the right reasons. So, I mean, we've got the speaker list is insane, and from everyone to kind of sport players to politicians to, I guess, kind of change makers within the sector. But we've got opening talks from Denise Lewis, Judy Murray, Anton Ferdinand is coming along to talk about race equality. We've got a big feature interview first day with Azim Rafiq and his sister Anna. We have, for the first time, all of the equality, diversity, inclusion leads across all of the major football organisations, which is going to be really powerful to get them all in one place.
Miracle, you got them all in one place.
It's it's just like there's so much I could go into. Please check out the website and the agenda, because the list just goes on and on. There's so much going on. But yeah, it's less than 3 weeks to go, with the 8th and 9th of March in Birmingham. We have free tickets available for young people and community leaders. So we're giving up to 300 free tickets every day. Again, to make sure that those voices are part of the conversation, they're in the room, they are taking part in this collaborative approach. There's specific workshops for young people. We're doing an inclusive sports showcase. Like there's so much going on. It's crazy.
Amazing. I mean, do check it out if anyone's of interest, especially those who are directly affected or in the industry. It's going to be incredible. I mean, just to go to Alex quickly, if I may, on this. Alex, like, you've probably seen quite. I'm hoping that your tech is back with us.
It's back. It's back.
Yeah. I mean, you've probably seen a massive shift, in your time since you started back in professional game in rugby to today in the equity, diversity, and inclusion space, right? You've probably seen the game change massively over your time.
Yeah, definitely, and it's being talked about a lot more, and that's the way it's got to be. I think, what was said in the changing room 15, 20 years ago as a joke isn't needed, and I think and people need calling out for doing things like that. And for me, the more we talk about all these problems that we're talking about today and get it in the open, the better.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Within certain sports in particular, there's still an attitude at times around sort of dressing room banter, locker room banter, that kind of thing. And whilst like we're seeing a massive shift in society and apart from not just awareness, like action led change, I think sport needs to catch up at times. And we've seen positive moves in the last 12-18 months, particularly over the COVID period, like Jamie referenced. But I think sport, we always seem to be an industry that's a little bit behind the curve and always sort of trying to play catch up. And I think the work that Jamie's doing with the Include Summit really is going to be an opportunity for us to actually for once get ahead of that curve and really start to affect that change. Alex, I'm going to come back to you. Obviously, I'm mindful of time and everyone's time today, so I really want to cover everything, and your personal journey and your story is like incredibly moving and challenging, and should come with a warning to anyone listening, obviously, that that you had major news. I mean, last year it was back in 2020 actually, wasn't it? 2020.
Yeah, April 2020, I had my diagnosis after 6 months of testing, and after having that news and not being in shock because I knew there was something wrong, I thought to myself, well, I can't be the only player having these problems. So I started talking to players I played against, and the numbers that are or not in a great way is ridiculous.
What were the symptoms? What made you think I'm not 100% here?
So short-term memory was really bad. Concentration. If I was in, and it may happen today, but if I'm in a conversation, I'd lose track of where I was in that conversation halfway through. I would really struggle. Zoom has been brilliant over lockdown for this, with one person talking at a time. But if I was in a room of people and there was lots of conversations going around a board meeting or a dinner party or something like that, I just couldn't take all the information in and come out. I have to leave the room because it was just like noise coming from everywhere. So there was all those symptoms. I'm quite a chilled out, laid back person. All I got to do is train and eat, and I'm pretty happy. But I was losing my temper over little silly things that I would never normally lose my temper over. And the final straw, I was putting it down to stress with work and making excuses, really, where Mel, my wife, was trying to get me to go to the doctors, and I got lost on a bike ride that I've done close to 100 times, a loop from my house, and I didn't know where I was and had a blackout moment. And that was me then, after coming home, realizing that there was something up, and I started to get tested.
There's a question coming out. Did knowing that you were not alone in your injuries help you fight the symptoms at the time of your diagnosis?
I just wanted to put my experiences of after my diagnosis and having a neuropsychologist and an occupational therapist come and talk with me and make changes in my life, help me personally, and I wanted to pass those on to my mates and people I've talked to with things that they can manage day to day, and it has made a difference to me. and I know the other people that I've talked to, but unfortunately, I've talked to families who've lost through suicide, people after a concussion, because they weren't treated correctly or put back on the field too soon. And there's a long way to go with all of this, and the fight we're on. But I know we're doing it for the right reasons. I love rugby. There's so many amazing things that rugby gives you in the life. There's just a very small area that certain people have got their head in the sand over, and changes need to be made as soon as possible, because every day that the things that are wrong are in place, players are being affected.
I mean, I'm going to come back to you on this, but Simon, like, just from your perspective within football, I mean, has this ever come across your radar? Have you ever thought during your time in football, whether it's through concussions or, you know, head collisions or even heading the ball, has it ever crossed your mind that this could be a thing that affects you in that sport?
No, to be honest, never. Not until I actually spoke with Alex. He told me his situation and kind of what he's trying to achieve in raising awareness and helping other athletes, not just in rugby, but of course in football and other sports. And it's never been brought to our attention. We were never made aware of it.
What happens if you get, you know, in your career? I know you can only speak to your career and maybe not today, but you know, so 4 years ago in the Euros or something, if you go up for a header and you sort of knock yourself out, you know, what's the protocol then, or what was it during your career, or was there not really one?
No. I mean, I can remember a couple of times I've taken a whack to the head, got up a bit dizzy. It's just literally, you're right, yeah, play on, because we, you know, as athletes, you just try and get on with it, whether you're injured or not. You didn't really take into account if there's any serious damage or any, you know, damage that could possibly be thereafter. In the moment, you just carry on, and you know the physios just have a quick look. Yeah, I guess it's something that's not really, you can't really see if you're concussed or really understand what being concussed is. But yeah, I guess the last couple of years there's been a bit more conversation about it, a bit more awareness about it. But yeah, it's literally get on with it. You're all right. Get back on the pitch.
Alex, there's times where you have complete memory loss, right? In terms of games that you were an active part of.
Well, a lot of my career, I know I played in certain games, big games, but actually being in the stadium, playing in front of 80, 90,000 people, I've got no memory. My last game for Wales, I know I played in it. I've got the jersey down on the wall downstairs. It's the first time we beat England in Twickenham in 24 years, and I can't remember being in there. At the start of lockdown, they showed that game as a replay on BBC, and it was as if I was watching it for the first time. But for me, the frustrating part with all this in rugby, in football, in NFL, this knowledge has been out there. They were having the same conversations that we're having now in rugby and football and American football in 1930 in boxing. This knowledge has been there with regards to concussions, and this is where concussions, the education is so important. I thought a concussion was in my career where you were knocked out, but 90% of concussions are where you're not knocked out. So when you hit your head and you felt a bit dazed or stars, each one of those was causing damage to me personally, and my neurologist worked out I had over 100,000 subconcussions during my career, and that's from being professional. I started playing when I was 4, and there was contact was allowed when I was 4, and this is where things definitely need to change. And I think rugby on a Saturday is as safe as it can be. There's some small things around rules and subs and things like that, but let's control the controllables, and they're things that are done Monday to Friday. So the amount of contact players do in training, the NFL reduced the amount of contact 11 years ago. Rugby still hasn't done that. They've given guidelines, but no coach will stick to a guideline if they're under pressure, the team isn't doing well. The mentality with a lot of coaches is more is better. Let's get out and we'll be up for the next game. train harder than you play. And I think that old school mentality needs to change as soon as possible.
Just a shout out to Joe for tuning in. We'll come to you in a bit, Joe. Thank you so much. Who's in Saudi Arabia, I believe. I want to tie this into a few different areas. In fact, I mean, like, because the unseen injury or the unseen cost and fatigue and we get misunderstood often as a mental health organization because a lot of our work is heavily weighted that way. But we've seen a lot of athletes sort of cite mental well-being and mental health as reasons to not compete and so on. I mean, there's a couple of things actually. Like Dan, with the athletes that you've worked with, or first of all, have you ever been aware of CTE and the impact of concussions and head traumas in sport with any of the athletes you've ever worked with personally? Has that ever come across your sort of desk?
No, not in the sports that we work in. I suppose, rugby, boxing, martial arts to an extent. Potentially, we represent Jay Jones, who obviously does a lot of kicking people in the head and probably gets kicked.
That's what I was alluding to. Yeah,
they wear head guards in Taekwondo, so there's obviously a level of protection where that has been identified as a real risk, and it's being
on that. Sorry, I'll jump in. The head guard only protects for cuts; it doesn't affect the brain rattling around. So
yeah, I suppose the Taekwondo head guard is pretty padded, so I'm not sure if it would have a bigger effect. I'm not sure if you know much about
it doesn't.
Yeah. So
I learned I learned that we can get from Alex that, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I learned, if my memory serves me, that even juking, changing direction at speed, you can get subtle subconcussions. Is that right?
Yeah, even tackle to the chest, because the brain inside the skull still rattles round, and that's what causes the damage. So and I think that's why in men's boxing in the Olympics now, they don't fight with the head guards, because people thought they were indestructible and were going through fights where they shouldn't carry on. That's why in rugby, they're trying to get kids to not wear these head guards, because they think they're invincible and flying into everything. So it gives them an extra level of confidence where they're still causing damage to the brain.
But
sorry to jump in then with you.
No. Actually, I'm gonna stay with you, and I'm gonna go back to my other point in a second. But in terms of change, and I mean, it's the theme that I don't want to depart from. The work that you're doing with Head for Change, just tell us about like that, because obviously it's a very personal story and personal journey, but you've now obviously put in provision to help others, and it's been overwhelming, the numbers of athletes that have come to you for support. And I did a talk last night with Head for Change and the community there, and I was blown away by obviously like all these individuals, all these faces on the screen, all either have got early onset dementia or brain injury or are struggling, and a lot of it, like I say, is this invisible illness. I mean, talk to us about Head for Change briefly before I sort of change tack, if you don't mind.
Sorry. So Head for Change, the three key areas is education. So where myself and Simon, we didn't have education on what a concussion was, and I think we've got to get that right from grassroots all the way up to senior level, including the parents, including the coaches. Like at amateur level, there's no spotters in the stand looking out for concussion. So that's where your teammates, your coaches, that even people watching have got to understand that if they are a bit dazed after a contact, that they need to be pulled out. And for me, that is such an important part. The second is research, and independent research away from the governing bodies. So whatever is found in that research will be shared with everybody, because that hasn't been the case in a lot of instances in research in the past. And I think players and everybody involved in any sport where there's contact just need to know the truth and understand that you carrying on after a head knock can cause implications immediately, but also in later life. So education, and then support for the players who are affected, but also also their families. So we're doing lots with Head for Change, where I will get together with players who've been diagnosed or are going through their diagnosis at the moment, support. A lot of them are, I say a lot, but there's quite a few who are not doing any exercise at the moment. So we're just trying to give them tips to get off the sofa and just go for a walk to start with, and build up from there. The diet, alcohol, as much alcohol they can stop drinking. I stopped drinking about 3 years ago, but a lot of people are using that as a coping mechanism, and it's not the best, obviously, for them. So we're just trying to give them all the tools. One of the app that we partner with you, the Thrive app. I know a lot of the people are using that, and it's really making a difference. As I said, we're only a young charity and we're at the start, but we're just trying to help in all areas that we can.
Amazing. And look, we're proud to support it in the best way we can, and I think it's important work. And I think you touched on the app, the mental wellbeing app, which provides access to live one-to-one coaching for clinical therapists. It provides signposting and other things, and seamlessly that ties it back into the question I was going to go to really Dan for, and open it up to all of you. But we see a lot of invisible injury. I mean, we've seen athletes, Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, Ben Stokes, these are major high profile athletes pull out of competition, citing mental health and mental well-being. I mean, like, Dan, what are your thoughts on this, and what more change do you think is needed within that space to care for athletes, especially around mental well-being and unseen injuries?
Yeah, no, look, Alex is obviously doing some fantastic work there, and even in this call, I've learned a lot. And it will start a conversation with me and some of the athletes that we represent around their well-being. But you referenced Simone Biles there, which I think is a great example of some of the I suppose leadership that is needed in the space, and she really ties this conversation back. She's a young Black female who has stood up and said on her biggest stage in her career, she said, "I'm not okay." And she said, "I'm not okay, and it's okay to not be okay," which is incredibly brave on a personal level. As an athlete who strives to be on the biggest stage and has been successful so many times in the past, to put aside, that individual target and say, it's more important that I feel okay and I'm mentally in a good place than it is to win this gold medal is hugely admirable. But then also doing that, knowing the amount of stick that she was going to take online, right? We talked about social media earlier and the power of the platforms, but I think some of that stuff around Simone this summer or last summer was some of the best and worst of social media in one hit. She got so much support from her community, from fans that were watching, from people that are aware of these I suppose hidden illnesses such as mental health. But there were so many negative comments out there, and people like Piers Morgan, I think, is one example of someone who came out and had a point of view on that, which is just so damaging for Simone, for young athletes all over the country. But the more we can have athletes like Simone, standing up and heroing their own problems and their own issues and the challenges that they're facing, and kind of setting examples to young athletes to say, what, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to speak to someone. It's okay to seek advice and seek help. It is only going to help, to have leadership in this space from the best in the world. But alongside that, you need organisations like what Alex is doing, like what Jamie is doing in diversity and inclusion as well. So when those young athletes turn around and they go, okay, I've got some of the same feelings that Simone had, or I feel excluded from my sport, like cricket, we've seen it recently, some of the bad examples in that space, they can turn to their local team or their local community or to organisations and have a conversation where they can get support, because it's no good the athletes at the top of the sport shining a light on these issues if the young athletes at grassroots can't get the support that they need. So, kudos to everyone on this call for the work they're doing in that space as well.
No, I really appreciate it. And to be honest, a little shout out to an athlete down there who dropping a message in. We're more than happy to continue that support. And actually with them, it was all around mental well-being and particularly the wellness app. And what you said there, I have to echo. We need more athletes to feel safe, to be able to reach out, speak their truth, but to not only I guess, the sport, or in their case, often their employer, the governing bodies, whomever it may be. Like, this is why, and today's not about Beyond the White Line. Really, it's about you all and other change makers in the space. But it's something that I really want to drive this message. We find over the last 3 years, time and time again, athletes don't often want to speak to those directly within their network, as in coaches, managers, clubs, associations. They don't feel confident to speak to those organizations because they are either the organization that selects them, that pays them, that has an impact on their career direction potentially. They need independence. We need independent organizations like ours and or others to ensure that there's that non-biased, non-conflicting approach where it truly is about the individual, not about some other agenda with someone with no flesh in the game. We need that. And I think that's really important, especially in this space. I absolutely champion what Simone and others are doing. But I think to see more examples of that, there needs to be this air of independence, like platforms and organizations that can support them in that when they do, because I think that's a block and a barrier, and that is truly findings that we've had time and time again, is that there's a barrier because mentally they feel like that's not the route to go down. It takes a brave few to trail that blaze that trail, so to speak. So obviously mindful of time, just before we move into the final sort of 10-15 minutes, I just want to remind everyone we are going to be taking questions, some of which we've already popped up, but we'll go to them and answer them. If you're finding this beneficial today, please share the content with as many people as you can so we can continue to grow the community and drive the message. I don't do this kind of stuff, so I'm not very good at all that, so you'll have to excuse me. I'm going to just dive straight back in to the matter at hand. And Simon, I'd love to come to you now, if I may, and talk, and again, open to the floor, but talk about CBD Performance, why you founded CBD Performance, and what your lived experience was during your time in your career and towards the end of your career that really made you go that way. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. I mean, I was with you in London when you launched, and I remember a certain news article, and I don't know if you're happy to speak about it, where the copy, if you will, the text, the body of the article was accurate and fair, but the imagery they used completely misrepresented what CBD is all about. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think as I mentioned previously, throughout my career, I always struggled with recovery and pain management, sleep, and what most people don't know, Alex will appreciate this, is the recovery, and after games, it's so difficult to sleep. It's such a huge part of your recovery process, and the pain management. Athletes are always in pain, and what we tend to get is just pills from the doctors just to mask that, to get you through the next day of training or the games. And it kind of built up throughout six or 7 years, where I was therefore reliant on painkillers, sleeping tablets, because I was always one that never wanted to miss training. I never wanted to miss a game. Loved playing football, loved training. But I was coming home in absolute pieces. I couldn't get out of the car after games. Sometimes I couldn't get up the stairs. And for me to get through that and sleep was to take painkillers and sleeping tablets. And then my anxiety is leveled because of what I'm taking. And I'm trying to take something to mask that. And in the end, I just come a glorified drug addict, which people don't realise most athletes are. They're reliant on these painkillers to get them through training, and so I had to seek an alternative substance, natural substance that could aid the problems that I was having. And CBD, it's cannabis derived. It's a compound from the cannabis leaf, but it's not cannabis. And there's a huge misconception with this. There's a lot more, from when in 2018 they removed it from the doping list. So CBD in its entirety is legal, and that's what made me look into it. I had some friends that recommended it. I did a lot of research. Obviously, I was extremely dedicated to my sport. I wanted to make sure that it was legal and safe. And when I found a product that I could take, it had such a positive impact on me, where for the first time in my whole career, I could sleep without using a tablet. My anxiety levels dropped. I was coming towards the end of my career, so I knew that I had to try something to try and prolong it, but the damage was already done. And after that, I saw a huge gap in the market where, there wasn't really a sport and fitness kind of based product where it was transparent, it was premium, it was natural, there was all purpose-led good stuff. So I just thought, being in sport, you just do what you've got to do. You've got to kind of take the risks. You've got to take it upon yourself, and that's kind of given me that platform to take risks and create my own company. And we want to try and make CBD more of a mainstream, everyday product that can try and help you get away from these pharmaceutical aids that aren't really helping you. They're more blockers. They're more temporary wins. And just going back to that conversation that we had about the mental health and all that kind of stuff, I think football especially is something that is so stuck in the olden days and not looked at. If I was to ever turn around to my manager and say, I'm struggling today, I won't play again for the team. And that's a fact. They can say what they want. That's a fact. It's going to have an impact on me. I actually saw, I took independent help at 22. I saw a psychologist myself. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it, but I felt like I needed to speak to someone. Whereas I've had many players that have struggled with this and not had a platform or not had someone to talk to about it, because again, they're going to have a negative, or they feel like they're going to have a negative impact publicly if they come out and say it, but also a negative impact internally in terms of playing games. It could affect their contract. It could affect, their opportunities of playing. So I think there's a huge problem, especially in football, with having open conversations. And like I said, even the clubs bringing in their own sports psychologist, you don't want to speak to them because that psychologist is working on behalf of the club, which could impact your game. So I think, again, just to reiterate the need for independent bodies like yourself and what you guys are doing, it's such a huge thing.
Just a comment there. I don't know if you can see that on your screen. I'm an amputee. Use CBD oil to mask phantom limb pain instead of the heavy drugs such as morphine and gabapentin. Yeah, I think I've done that justice. Been taking it for 5 years. Amazing. So, I mean, like, you can't, I'm right in thinking you can't really make claims as yourself. I mean, there are certain regulations that stop you making claim stuff, but from your experience, it really has helped with the depression, the other mental health challenges that come during that high pressure career.
Yeah, and it's in huge demand. The NFL have invested $1 million into research in CBD because they've heard the positive impacts from players. They all want to take it. They want to take it. They want to try it as an alternative, a natural alternative. Unfortunately, the PFA and in the UK, we're stuck. It's all political. It's legal, but they won't look into it. They won't research it. They won't look at alternatives. And that's the problem that we've got at the moment.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we still have these blocks and the common misconceptions around it being, sort of THC based, a high? People still assume when you say like CBD or cannabis oil, people automatically assume that it's sort of got that same high as if you were smoking cannabis leaf, for example. Right?
I think it's education. Again, I'm a professional athlete. I've never taken drugs in my life, but CBD has helped me. It's helped me. And I swear by it. I don't take any pharmaceutical drugs whatsoever now. I take my CBD. And
Alex,
it's not just me.
Alex, do you use CBD as well?
Yeah, Simon and I spoke a few years back just before he launched, and I've been taking it ever since. So it helps now. I've upped my training for this Ironman, and for recovery, it's been absolutely brilliant. And I was really struggling with sleep, and now I'm getting a good 8 hours. So I thoroughly recommend it.
Simon, so what do you think we need to do? Education is key. Your goal, is it fair to say, I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but what is your goal with CBD performance, and is it to change the industry and change attitudes around that?
I think it's to change attitudes around it, certainly in professional sport, but just give an alternative, natural solution that can be used in your everyday supplements that most healthy people take or want to improve your health or well-being, your recovery, your sleep. It's just an alternative. And I think, we've been so stuck in our ways in the old school kind of thinking with, your paracetamols, your sleeping tablets, and everyone knows they're not going to cure you, they're not going to help you, they're not necessarily good for you. So I think it's just opening that conversation, the research, the transparency, and it definitely needs some investment. As I said, it's great to see the NFL investing in this. Yeah. Just because of the huge demand. And I know in football, I know in rugby, it's a lot more accepted in rugby for sure, but football, there's still a huge stigma. So hopefully we can change the education around that and open it up to the mainstream as well, because in the US currently, they're years ahead of the UK and Europe.
Amazing. Well, I think definitely in terms of the mental health aspect, I'm really intrigued to see the links that I'd love to learn more about, the intrinsic links between, it'd be interesting to see the levels of anxiety reported. I see quite a lot of data with the athletes that we work with, and we're seeing double the national average reporting challenges around anxiety and depression. So be really interesting, and it's not something that we can lead on necessarily that I'm aware of, but be interesting to see if there was a study that was able to be done to almost split the group and see over time across thousands of athletes, who are those numbers diminishing, does it have that impact, not to mention the other health benefits and pain management and so on. So I think it's really fascinating. It's an area, any natural holistic alternative way to help support people, especially across sport and athletes who are in high pressure, potentially with physical injuries, mental wellness and so on. I think it's a really important area that we explore and try and move away from that sort of pharmaceutical edge personally. So I'd love to see more about it, and hopefully we can drive more awareness through this and other means.
I think the reality is they're all so closely intertwined, aren't they? You can't speak about mental well-being, physical well-being, social media, creating a diverse and equal environment on there. You can talk about them on their own, but if you really want to address athlete well-being, they're all part of the same thing. And if an athlete's injured, they're going to take heat on social media. That's probably going to affect their mental health. If there's not a inclusive environment in the locker room, that's going to affect performance, probably going to affect mental health. These things are all intertwined. So it's great to have these open dialogues, and all routes should be considered for prioritizing athlete being. And if this is a way forward, then exciting times, in particularly for Simon and his team. And
this is why we have Dan on the call, by the way. I mean, the most articulate panelist that you can ever wish to have on your call. That was so beautifully put. Could someone please caption that up and put that as the quote of the day? Dan, I'm going to stay with you and ask you this to close before we wrap today. And I can't thank you all enough for your time. I mean, really, genuinely, it's really humbling every time people give their time. But Dan, in terms of Changemakers, I guess, brands, individuals, athletes, industry, anything really across the landscape of sport, two parts really to this. Who do you think is currently changing the game, and what do you see around the corner as the next big thing?
Oh, wow. Nice question.
I mean, pick whatever you want. You're not obliged to answer it all.
Yeah, no, look, I think let's pick one example, and I think leaning into Jamie's space a little bit, and with diversity and inclusion being such an important part of what we're doing, I think someone like Alex Scott is just doing fantastic stuff in a sport that historically has had so many barriers in it. As a black woman, to not only be, the face of women's football, but now one of the faces of men's football, face of the Olympics. She's a fantastic presenter, and I think we all have to admire not only her ability to do her job, but the amount that she must have gone through over the last 5 years. The barriers that she would have faced to get into those positions, and then also the criticism that she would have faced both in meeting rooms, but then also on social media. So I think kudos to Alex, who's really put herself out there, done a lot of great work, worked incredibly hard to get where she is, and has laid a path for those that will follow her. I don't think it means that it will now be easy for black women in football to go on and do what Alex does, but it will certainly be a little bit easier. So well done to Alex. And then in sport, those athletes that are doing a great job are generally the ones that we know about. So, Marcus Rashford is obviously doing fantastic work, and hopefully has blazed a trail for athletes to really stand up and have a voice on issues that they're passionate about. And I think that will be the future, right? It's about athletes realizing that in a world that is so complicated and so difficult for so many people, that they are beacons of hope and inspiration for a lot of people that are going through a lot of things. So how can athletes, how can teams be open and honest about their struggles, the areas that they're really passionate about, and how can they create change in those spaces, and maybe bring brands, organizations, teams with them, to help make sport more inclusive for athletes, players, people in the back room, people that work in sport, and people that enjoy sport across the board. So, from my perspective, I think we'll see more of athletes driving change and hopefully, pulling people with them on that direction. But it's certainly not going to be a straight path. And I'm sure everyone on this call, I'm sure, is excited to be a part of that change. But there's some really exciting opportunities out there.
100%. Thank you so much. Jamie, I'm going to come to you. Similarly, I mean, just really, who's inspiring you at the moment? Who's driving change aside from yourself? I mean, you're all included, right, on my list. But and really, what do you see as the next big thing?
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to do that, so I was just thinking about that when Dan was talking. And I totally agree with kind of the media people that are leading some of this stuff. But I think it almost sounds a bit corny, but the people that are doing this day in, day out are the real people that are pushing the change. So the people that are prepared to call people out on Zoom calls, on team meetings, to say, actually, I'm not comfortable with you using that language, or do you understand what that actually means? Or the people that say, have we got everybody's opinions and lived experience considered around this table? If not, we've got to go and find it. We're not making informed decisions. The leaders out there that are prepared to say, this organization is institutionally racist. All organizations are institutionally racist, and we need to get over that and not be worried about it. It's about what we do that makes the difference. The leaders that are kind of prepared to stand up and say, I don't know enough about this. This isn't about the brand, the organization. This is about doing the right thing, and we need to be better. Those are the people I see in this space that are the ones that are ultimately going to push this stuff on from being embedded and it being a media conversation, I guess. And I guess in terms of the future, I think more people being prepared to be open to conversation around this, that this isn't about accusing people. This isn't about putting kind of people on the James Bond chair with a light shining on them saying, what are you going to do about this? This is about a collective movement, and it is what we're trying to do with the Include Summit. But I think what we're really excited about, aside from delivering an amazing event, is where we go next with this and how the community comes with us. I don't think Gurmaj and I want to be like the strategic voice of this stuff. We want to help facilitate everyone to build on this together, and that's the exciting thing for me.
Amazing. I agree. I think that's it is literally on the horizon, but that's going to be massive. Alex, if you wouldn't mind, just from your perspective, I mean, anyone that's inspiring you or impressing you in this space in terms of change, and what you think is on the horizon that's significant.
Well, for me personally now, it's just about keeping the pressure on with regards to, and this in the press. Fortunately, all the media outlet.
Oh no! I think we just lost Alex at the most inopportune moment. No, he's coming back in. Hang on. Maybe not. I'll come back to him. Simon, if we come to you, that's not bad. We've gone quite far with that technical glitch. Alex, you back? No, Simon, I'm going to come to you while we work out Alex's technical issues. So same questions to you, if I may. Just who's driving the most change? Who's inspiring you, and what do you think is the next big movement?
Well, sit back comfortably, mate, because I'm going to give you a huge ego boost here. Out of everything, I've been working with you for 3 years now, nearly. Well, probably more actually. And from when you first met me, you saw a huge gap in what there's something fundamentally missing in athletes and support, aftercare, a place to go, a place that's independent, where athletes feel safe to talk about their situations for help. And what you've achieved in the last 3 years has been, amazing. We've settled, we've had numerous conversations around every single subject, every single flaw, especially in football. And what I feel like you've got a perfect opportunity to kind of provide that solution to clubs, to sports teams, to athletes. And I'm not just being biased. I'm saying this as a genuine opinion that, there's been a lot of plaudits, a lot of press, a lot of interest in this sector. There's also a lot of poor journalism, a lot of mates helping each other out. And you haven't had any of that. You haven't had the support. You haven't had the opportunity. Now, you have had an opportunity in certain clubs, which you have also proven the method. You've proven that this can help. This can help from the top to the bottom. It can help staff. It can help the whole infrastructure at a football club. And I feel like the opportunity is now to kind of make this more mainstream, make this more acceptable, and I just feel like you've got the answer to a lot of questions that currently go on in sport. So I'm hoping, especially this year, there's more opportunities that you can start kind of getting into clubs and working alongside athletes and players, because, as I said, you can answer a lot of questions that they have.
Well, thanks, Simon. I mean, I should probably put you on our advisory board. No, I really appreciate it. It's hard to take positive feedback at times. That's not something I feel entirely comfortable with, but I'm incredibly grateful, and I can't, obviously thank you enough for your support. And I hope that we can continue the work. I am really proud of the work that we're doing. But today it's not about us, so I'll keep that short. Alex, are you back? Let's see. I think he is. I'm going to give it one last go. Alex, can we hear you? We can't hear you. So I'm going to let the team try and see if we can get Alex back. Listen, we'll just wrap up with a few questions if we can. I'm going to dive over to the right-hand side. I might pop one up on the screen. Let's start going. Can the public do anything to help aid these support systems to help beat the stigma of mental and physical well-being in the industry? I mean, anyone, feel free, fire at will.
I think we kind of touched on it briefly earlier, but support your team, support your players. Be a positive, comment on their feed. I think we always say, it's the silent majority that doesn't get heard, and it's the loud minority that does. And the one racist comment or the one sexist comment on your Twitter feed is the one that jumps out. But the more of those kind of positive comments that dilute those inevitable bad comments is only going to help players. So if you're watching your team and someone has a bad game, don't just sit there and watch all the bad comments pile in. Be vocal and support those players and say, you know what, you did your best, and there's always next week. And I think just supporting the players as if they were your own kid or your own teammate is how we can really build a public swell around positive support, and be accepting of those athletes that come out with issues or who say they're having problems. Show that support as well.
Amazing. Straight back in with another one from Bethan. Jamie and Dan, what was the crucial moment when you realized you wanted to make a change within the industry through your companies? We go Jamie on that one quickly.
When I realized that politics was preventing me from doing my job, was time to just do it myself and just take the risk and go for it. This it was time to get out of that space and be able to help people more direct. I'm trying to be really careful about what I'm saying.
I know, I can tell you're watching your P's and Q's. I mean, listen, this is a safe space.
Just
only
say
going
it
across multiple platforms. Say it as it is, Jamie.
I think when you work at the top of the tree, kind of politically, financially, it's an incredible place to be able to have amazing resource to do big things. But I think sometimes when you work in those big kind of strategic financial engines, all that stuff gets in the way and you get so far disconnected from the real world, and you almost have too much on your plate to make kind of the simple decisions. We have to go back to basics. And that was the bit for me that was like, there's people out here that want support, and politics is getting in the way of just being able to help people. And that was the time to make a move.
Non-biased, non-conflicting, independence all the way, everyone. Joe, listen, do you feel there's enough support for young players who have struggled with a serious injury, and if there are solid pathways to keep them involved in the sport? Anyone want to take that?
Well, as someone who's retired for injury, the simple answer to that is a massive no. Just through my experience of retiring from football, I was told that I had to retire from football. Obviously, I had a long career, international, left the game, and not one single phone call to make sure, are you okay? What are you up to? What's next? Can we help with anything? Can we do this? Can we do it? Not one. And you'd think from a governing body, you'd at least get a phone call, courtesy phone call to see what you're up to, how's your mental state, all that kind of stuff. There needs to be an aftercare program for sure, because a lot of people in the public will turn around and say, well, how can we feel sorry for athletes? They've achieved what they've achieved. They've made a lot of money. They've done that. But what people forget is they've spent their whole life dedicated to one thing only. It's great that there's now opportunities outside and interest outside, but if you don't have that interest, you have that routine of being a professional footballer or an athlete, and you're doing it day in, day out, and you lose that routine. What are you waking up for? You're going to need support for that. It's so difficult to go through. So having an independent or the governing bodies reaching out and just asking, it doesn't take a lot. They've got the resource to do it. It's just thinking about like you say, James, human first. People forget that we're humans. They see the athlete, they see the job title, they may see the money, but they forget that we're humans and we go through the same situations, personal situations that everyone else does.
And I think we can assume that if Simon and Alex aren't getting the support at an elite level, then it's not coming in for the kids at junior level, right? So
100%. Dan, that is so on topic at the moment. I mean, I've had, Simon knows this and I'm happy to share this, but I'm having many referrals at the moment for the young academy ages. I mean, over the last week, maybe half a dozen referrals straight into care. I mean, that's an issue. That's an epidemic. And I'm also sort of tapering back a little bit, the full extent, but it's unbelievable. It's not happening at elite level enough. I mean, I was asked to comment on the Crystal Palace initiative of rolling out, extended aftercare support for the academy system. And it's great. Look, it's great that there is something else, but having, access to call someone, for an extended period of time isn't proactive enough. It doesn't go deep enough, wide enough. And I sound like my promotional video now, but it isn't. So anyway, we are out of time, everyone. Thank you so much. We have one very quick announcement to make, and we haven't got a big flashy video or reveal or anything like that. But we are really excited to announce that in the autumn of 2022, this year, we will be launching the Beyond the White Line Changemakers Awards, Good in Sport Awards. It is going to be an awards, again, as you can imagine, not for profit. It is not an awards where, we're focused on the commercial entities or, the best in brand and the best. It is entirely dedicated to the human first approach of those change makers who are really making a difference in sport. It is to recognize the best in class in those areas across all the areas we talked about today and beyond. The whole premise behind these awards are to make them inclusive to all the people making the difference. So I'm really excited to launch that. We're going to be communicating it across all our channels in the coming days and weeks, how you can nominate organizations, individuals, athletes, whomever, based on the areas and categories. There'll be a portal for you to find out more information and nominate people, and also then the actual, obviously, judging shortlisting process and then event itself, to which everyone here is of course invited. But we're really excited about that, and I look forward to seeing that. I can't see Alex, but Alex, thank you so much for being on today. We've got unfortunately the screen isn't showing you, but really appreciate you being here today. Jamie, Dan, Simon, thank you for everything and all your contributions, and I really look forward to doing this again follow and tweet us and contact us if there's anything we could do to support you. Anything today that has raised any concerns or triggered anything that you want some support with, do reach out to us, and we look forward to doing Changemakers episode 2 in the not too distant future. So thanks to everyone, and have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, James.
Bye everyone.
Cheers, guys.